two, one.
Hello there, you good people. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Life on Earth. I'm Robert Nasir. I'm with Amy Nasir, my co-host in All Things Good.
Hello.
And we're so glad you're here. Sorry we're late. Crazy days, you may notice.
Hello there, you good people.
Oh, I got a mute here. What the heck?
And we are going to listen
goodness.
to ourselves right now just for a test, I'm
You know,
sure.
This will be the most casual show we've ever done, which means it'll be fun. It will be great fun. We've already got you in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary Aline and Bonnie, a couple of our favorite people. Mary Aline has already come in with the super chat even before we started. Again, this is Life on Earth for August 12th, 2021. Thank you for joining us. Quick introduction to the show. Having given this introduction before, that in 1976, Ayn Rand said to the graduating class at West Point, formally, I call it objectivism, she said in regard to her philosophy, but informally, I call it a philosophy for living on Earth. That's right, this is Life on Earth. If this is a philosophy for living on Earth, it stands to reason that objectivists are and should be, and I'm sure you are, among the happiest, most optimistic, most successful, most benevolent, generous, awesome people on Earth. We've got the philosophy for living on Earth.
You know, we have such a great philosophy and we have a lot of great people, just amazing people. And I just love that fact. And I love to be a part of this. Thank you.
And we have a brownout in the studio. So the lighting is interesting today. Hopefully the audio is okay. All that other good stuff, you let us know in the chat. But having given that introduction now 12 times on video, and even before that on the Clubhouse version of this show, I have to say, probably should have said sooner. As much as it's true, and I'm sure you've all memorized it by now, there's a related proviso, an asterisk, a little caveat I've got to give. There are reasons, and all of us in Ayn Rand's philosophy, objectivism, fan groups, all of us are well aware of this. There are reasons why we might not always feel like the most successful, the most happy, the most benevolent, generous, optimistic people on Earth. And a lot of those have to do with our own personal, complicated lives. Life is complicated.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with existential factors, political factors, things going, we all know what's going out in the world, out in the world. It's why there are a certain number of objectivists who are often, if not always, angry. Ooh. There are things to be angry about.
Oh, angry.
Did you know that from 2016 to 2020, the president of the United States was Donald Trump? Wait. It gets worse.
The game show host?
The game show host.
Wait.
The wrestling guy.
The wrestling guy?
The real estate guy.
Really? Wait, Apprentice guy?
It gets worse. After that, do you remember who was vice president under Barack Obama? Old Joe? The old
Uncle,
pragmatist,
Uncle
sleazy
Joe.
Politician.
Yeah, let me smell your hair.
He's actually president now so the point is,
what? He's president?
There are a lot of reasons why it might sometimes, occasionally, every now and then be difficult to be among the most happy and joyous and optimistic and benevolent and generous people, but there's more. And that's what we need to talk about today. Because it turns out that psychology is a thing.
Is psychology a thing?
Psychology is a thing.
Is it?
Go figure.
Okay.
So in that regard, I recently rewatched a particularly good episode of the Aaron Brooks Show, in which he spoke to psychologist Gina Gorlin. Not the most recent one, although that was great too. He's done some great shows with Gina on child rearing, Montessori, worth hearing. But I've linked to those older shows, a good year or two old. Watch them, you'll be like, that could have been yesterday. Great shows on psychology. Links are in my show notes. Go to facebook.com/Robert Nasir or youtube.com/Robert Nasir or Twitter, whatever. You'll find the notes there. But this brought to mind the old DoubleTree chocolate chip cookie recipe.
So delicious when you get a canister of those and they're still warm.
We have a history with the DoubleTree that we're not going to share. But one of the great things about DoubleTree hotels, DoubleTree Inns, might still be, it's been a while, their chocolate chip cookie recipe. you would check in and they would give you a chocolate chip cookie at the front counter. And they were always there and they were always warm and they were always fresh, or at least seemed like it. And they were some of the best chocolate chip cookies you could get.
So nice. And they had walnuts in them. That just made them extra special.
And they had a secret recipe.
Yes.
And then at some point, they decided to make it public.
Did they?
So if you go to my show notes, go to facebook.com/Robert Nasir, there's a link to, or you could Google search it, the DoubleTree chocolate chip cookie recipe. And it turns out, if you follow these specific steps, if you follow this recipe, you get this great cookie and you always get the result. That's just how it works. But the recipe I really want to talk about today is the recipe for disaster.
Oh, the recipe for destruction.
That's right.
Like that, get some screamo in there. And
it's funny, the last time we had this discussion, Jennifer said, what about a recipe for destruction?
Yeah.
And that was an easy one because there's only 2 ingredients.
What's that?
Guns and roses.
Oh gosh, that's very funny. But
that will satisfy your appetite for destruction. A long time ago, I learned that complex emotions and states of consciousness or states of mind,
Yes.
complex emotions have more interesting causes. We know that anger is that state of consciousness that proceeds from an assault on your values, from somebody attacking or destroying or taking one of your values. Similarly, we know that fear is the sense of an impending loss of value. Happiness is the state of consciousness that proceeds from the achievement of your values. That's Ayn Rand's definition. And simple emotions, therefore, all you need to do is look in the objectivist corpus and you can find out how to have those emotions by achieving those values or by avoiding those situations, whatever the emotion is. Complex emotions end up having slightly more complex causes. But the classic one in coaching circles is the recipe for disappointment. So I'm going to share with you the recipe for disappointment. And once you have this recipe, it's great because anytime you want to or need to feel disappointed,
yes,
you will know what to do. So here it is.
Love disappointment.
Here it is. Anytime you want or need to feel disappointed, here's what you do. Decide in advance exactly what must happen in every detail for you to be satisfied. Decide in advance, get it in your head, exactly what's got to happen, the way it's got to turn out, the way it's got to be, the way the people involved need to act, the things they need to do, the way you need to perform. Decide in advance exactly how it's got to be for you to be satisfied. Now you've got it. You have got a recipe for disappointment that will serve you for the rest of your life. If you ever want to be disappointed, that is what you do. Now that sounds kind of...
It helps if you don't have a really detailed imagination like I do.
Yes. Now you might say, who would want to be disappointed? And that's my question. Who on earth would want to be disappointed? But how many people do you know? And maybe once or twice, Lord knows, I have made this mistake before of following this exact recipe and then being surprised afterward with the dish that you turned out.
Surprise!
I'm so disappointed. I wanted this, and this. I didn't want much. All I wanted was these 7 particular things to go exactly the way I wanted, and everything else could have been different. It is a recipe for, and it turns out that all of these complex situations can be understood in a similar fashion. We did our episode a couple episodes back, Politics and Love.
Yeah.
And we discussed the 5 languages of love and the 3 languages of politics. We even related them a little bit, but the 5 languages of love, the 5 ways that you communicate, again, not how you experience it, but how you communicate to somebody, I love you. And those were words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and receiving gifts.
Yes. There's a sixth one. It's called foot rubs.
Foot rubs. Well, foot rubs, is foot rubs an act of service or a receiving gift? That's hard to say. Maybe you're right. It needs to be a separate category, but clarity in knowing what your love languages are, your modalities, the way in which you communicate love. I mean, we all do all five. We all want all five. We're all like, I want all that stuff. But what really makes you feel it? What makes you feel loved? When this happens, you find yourself experiencing the love from your partner or partners. God knows I don't want to limit our relationships. Clarity in knowing your partner's most compelling modalities for communicating your value to them and their value to you. This allows you to build up recipes for love. This allows you to run that routine, that recipe, to do that thing that most says to them, I love you. Mm-hmm. You know, if you say that in the language that's most effective to you and they hear it, it might work, or it might feel a little alien to them, or it might be, and they won't even know the words, but they'll feel it. There they go, telling me they love me in the language they want to hear. Don't they know what I need to hear? So go back to that episode, Politics and Love. Put together your own recipe for love. You know, for me, it would be, 3 parts words of affirmation and 1 part acts of service. I don't know if it would be foot rubs or something else under acts of service. We don't mean self-sacrifice. Objectivists, no, we don't mean that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then
all know.
And then put that in the oven. Mm-hmm. The oven of physical touch for 90 minutes. And be sure to serve that while it's still hot. But your recipe will vary. So figure out your own recipe and then use that information. It's so easy to fall back into what we want, what we're used to, what we think. That just knowing these things, having these recipes, having this written down on a Post-it note here. There's a Post-it note. This is not my recipe for love. This is my recipe for calm.
Oh, very nice.
So yeah, I'll give you one.
What are the ingredients?
I'll give you one more example. My recipe for calm. I'll read it right off of the Post-it note. Number 1, empty the mixing bowl.
Okay.
Now the mixing bowl is your mind. This is your recipe for calm. And here's the thing. It doesn't have to be completely empty.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be all that clean. So don't get anxious about, how do I clean out my mind? No, just
buttery residue on the inside.
It's okay if there's still a little bit in the bowl. Just clean it out as best you can. Number 2, add in some self-gratitude. Mm-hmm. If you can't think of a reason to have self-gratitude, just realize you're running this calm script. You're running this recipe. That's a reason right there to be grateful to yourself for taking the time to do this. Number 3, slow, focused breathing. Give yourself 30 seconds of slow, focused breathing. That's a good one. That's one of those ones where I say this to myself and I'm like, yeah, I know what that's for. I don't really feel like doing it. But then
even if it ends up being just 5 seconds, not 30 seconds, it's worth it.
Well, that's the thing is I look at the clock, I do the thing, even though I don't want to do it. 30 seconds later, I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I did that. All of a sudden it makes sense after 30 seconds. Step number 4, add music. Put on the music that you know works for you. For me, that would be probably the Rain Song by Led Zeppelin or some similar classic rock slow piece of music. But what works for you? Classical music, something simple, something whatever works for you, and trying to achieve calm. Step 5, add 1 positive thought. Everybody could make a list of affirmations if they had time on their hands, but in this case, you don't want to do that. You're going for calm. Okay. So all you need is 1 positive thought. For me, it would be something as simple as any day above ground is a good day.
or
you're going for calm. You got to make it easy on yourself.
Right. And there's just, I always try to keep an open mind about, there are a lot of different ways to find joy and pleasure in the world instead of, getting out the box of chocolates. You can just put yourself into different states of calm physically in that way.
I like that. I like thinking of the chocolate as just one of the options out there.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, there's 10 other things I could do besides eating chocolate, but chocolate's there. Chocolate's okay. Chocolate's
Chocolate is
valid.
there
It has its
for
place.
you.
But when I remind myself without making it wrong or bad or boo, that chocolate's there, how do I say, wait, no, just it's one of the things. And those other 10 things are good too.
So Scott says, I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn, people like me. I don't know. I forgot how that went, but it's,
Undeniable. I'll just wrap up my
Yes.
recipe for
Oh,
calm
sorry,
real
go
quick.
ahead.
Step number 6, you've heard me say this before. And yeah, I hope you're watching this on video. Shoulders back, chin down, eyes forward. Open those eyes a little bit wider, breathe a little bit deeper. But here's the trick. Do it all, feel it. And then relax your eyes and relax your shoulders. Relax your posture.
Oh yeah.
Don't slouch, just get comfortable.
I get caught up just, still in that pose.
Yeah, see, that's the trick. That's the surprise ending is normally I would do the posture that gets you in an excited, powerful, energized mode, feeling capable, but we're going for calm this time. So you do that, you bring it all up precisely to bring yourself back out of it.
Oh, nice.
And you end up in a different place. You're like, well, don't I end up where I started? But you don't. It's a different thing. Step number 7, write down one small thing you will do to address the reason you have a need for calm, and make it a small thing. You're not solving the problem. You're not correcting everything that made you uncalm. You're simply doing one small thing, but you're putting it on paper for later. Write it down. Step number 8, set this paper aside. And step number 9, look into the distance for 30 seconds. It's another one of those ones where I read this and it sounds all woo, and I'm like, I can't believe I wrote that. And then I do it. I'm like, oh yeah, over there. In this case, it would be looking out the studio window over at that tree there. It's a damn big tree. I always think the tree in front of my house is too big, but then I look at trees like that, this monster-sized maple across the street, and I'm like, oh, my tree's okay. And yet that tree that's way too big, it's beautiful and it's strong and it's pretty. And trees are actually kind of cool. I mean, they're just trees. Who cares about trees? But that's,
Well,
30 seconds might be up, so I got to
Yeah,
let that go.
yeah.
Recipe for calm works every time I try it. Number 1, empty the bowl. 2, self-gratitude. 3, slow focused breathing. 4, add music. 5, add on 1 positive thought. 6, shoulders back, then back down. 7, write it down. 8, put the paper aside. 9, look in the distance. Works every time it's tried. So what I want to know in the
Works every
chat, because
time.
I got to go through the chat. We've got
Yes.
some great super chats. We've got some great comments. But
Well,
what I
before
want to
we
know
do
in the
that,
chat too is, what are your go-to recipes? While you think about that, I'm going to take a moment here and look through the questions we've
Yeah.
already got.
Yeah, well, before we do that real
Yes.
quick, is that I always find it helpful to the first solution to solving a problem is to identify that you have a problem in the first place.
I ain't got no problems.
So so I told myself today that I was going to really have a hard day today.
Oh,
And I did. And right now it's actually pretty relaxed and nice, but it's really nice right now because I can look back and say, I really did a good job at keeping myself grounded, keeping myself, knowing that, yeah, I'm coming into this, it's going to be very stressful, and knowing what my ingredients were for my recipe. And that included the deep breathing, and that included the positive thinking, and that included, focusing more on my posture and then relaxing. So it was good. It was good. So, all right. Yeah. Super chat. Marilyn, thank you so much. You are the best.
yes, Mary Aline is is truly the benefactor of the super chat today. In her 3rd super chat of the session, she says, examples of what might not go as expected, but a wonderful time is had anyway. And it's funny, I could probably think of 100 of these. I don't know why, but the first thing that came to mind was carnivals, amusement parks, Cedar Point. I don't go on rides. I don't do rides. There was a time, especially when we were younger, Amy was the rides person, and she would take me on rides. She couldn't get me on the big coasters. Fortunately, we would sometimes go with other friends who would go on the big coasters with her. But even the little ones and the fun stuff, be like, okay, because Amy loves this and I'll go. And yet,
maybe not anymore, but I used to.
and yet I would always enjoy it. And I would always be grateful for being tugged out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So that's one example of what Mary Elaine asks about, things that don't go as expected. I'm like, oh, I didn't want that, but it was great. And again, anything that'll pull you out of your comfort zone, as long as it doesn't make you too physically uncomfortable, we'll say,
Right.
it's a beautiful thing.
Well, one of the things that I did actually think to myself earlier today also was that in terms of expectations, we've got a comment in here. Marie says, expect the worst and things can only get better. And I'd say, no, expect that you're going to have some semblance of what you think might be happening. That was kind of like one of the things I thought, one of the positive things that I had thought. And I thought, I've got to do this, and that, and this, get all this done, like within very, very short time span. And by the way, we have a brownout at our house. And by the way, we have all these other things going on that are really quite depressing.
Why are the lights so wrong on Robert and Amy? And why do they look like they haven't done anything with their hair or anything else?
So I thought to myself, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this. I may not have all the time, but I'm going to just monitor the time. I know I'm going to have to set a timer. And I did, and I thought, when that timer goes off, this is what needs to go next. I'm not going to worry about that, what needs to happen next after that timer goes, until that timer goes off. So I gave myself a little space, and I basically, it was nice to have that timer, but it was also very nice to know that I wasn't visualizing everything exactly as I wanted it to happen. Sometimes that's good to do, but if you're on a time crunch and you're going into a stressful situation, try to just generalize in terms of your visualization for how it's going to go.
Yes. Well, yeah. And that idea of, expect the worst and then everything will be a delightful surprise. I used to think that.
Yeah.
I used to think that way. And there are probably contexts in which that strategy is still effective for me. But what I've learned is that if you always expect the worst and then you're always surprised how things turn out, the only problem with that is that you spend all of your time in a state of expecting the worst. And yes, you do get the occasional surprise of, oh, things weren't as bad as that. But your baseline is miserable.
Right.
At some point, I realized that's not actually a good place to hang out.
Yeah,
so
it's the same thing with worry, which I do, which is sort of my default, but I try not to, I try to put that aside as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I think I should probably do a show on it. I need to work it out and figure out what was the kernel of truth in that approach. And then if I have any advice on how to make it more, less miserable.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that the trick here is that you need to know yourself. You need to know what your emotional disposition is, what your tendencies are towards, which emotions. And then compensate from there.
Yeah. Ironically, since I have a somewhat benevolent affect, my default is kind of positive.
Yeah.
I think that might be why that approach was palatable to me, was because even though I was saying, yeah, I expect everything to fall apart and the parts that don't will be good, I kind of smuggled in happiness to it. Over time, though, it's wearing on you. And it turns out it's not actually an accurate representation of reality, because 99%, call it 99.8% of the things we worry about in life are never, ever going to happen.
It's true.
Think about that when you think about risk and reward and whether you want to take chances with things. The vast majority of the things we worry about are never, ever going to happen. Now, it's in the nature of things that you have to worry about them. You worry about your house getting broken into. It never gets broke. Your house never gets broken into, but that one time it does out of 365 days in the year and 3,650 days in 10 years, that one time it happens, that's big. That will poison your outlook. So there's a reason why, yes, 99.8% of the time, the things we worry about are never, ever going to happen, but you do need to guard yourself against that. In fact, in that regard,
Mhm.
in that regard.
Oh.
Well, before I open this package here,
It's a package, everybody.
before I
It's
open this
Christmas
package,
time.
I just need to take a moment to say thank you so much to the Ayn Rand Center
Mhm.
UK for sponsoring these shows, for putting these up, for making us part of the platform.
Yes, thank
And
you.
Mary Eileen, of course, and Sam, we need to get to Sam's question, are supporting the Ayn Rand Center by putting in the super chat. Thank you so much for that. You can also become a member. See, I brought their page up so I can actually say it properly this time. You can become a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK by going to aynrandcenter.co.uk,
Mhm.
because in the UK, they don't say .com. We're too commercial in the United States for the rest of the world to use that stuff. They use international TDLs, top-level domains.
Well,
aynrandcenter.co.uk. Remember, that center is RE at the end, not ER, like the folks in the colonies would say. Anyway, love the Ayn Rand Center
The
to
colonies.
UK, especially today, because if you're a member, and if you click on that website and then go to become a member at the top, or just /membership, if you become a member, you get to join things like the Don Watkins Communication Boot Camp. And they had one today where instead of reviewing somebody's speech or paper, they
Mhm.
spent a good hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes talking about social media, being
Mhm.
effective on social media. And they used ARC UK as an example of, how would we improve our social media, but they used all sorts of examples. And Don is just wicked smart when it comes to this. I know I say that about him, about everything that he says, but his advice on how to handle social media and Twitter in particular, super good. So if you're not already a member, become a member. You will get to participate in things like that communication boot camp and the Saturday morning induction sessions and the early Ayn Rand study sessions. And of course, all the public stuff that everybody sees here on YouTube too. So again, thanks ARC UK and especially today, the guys behind the scenes, Dylan and Rozzy, for making us a part of it. We are grateful for that. But I talked about 99.8% of the times, the things we worry about are never going to happen. And I've talked in the past before, my recipe for how much time to put into values versus guarding against disvalues
Yes.
was, what did I say? He said coyly, as if he didn't already know.
What did I say? I knew
What
I
percentage of
said.
time would I put into pursuing my values versus guarding against disvalues?
97%.
97%. I don't even know what the items in this package are going to look like because I just ordered them and this is a first time thing. But I can't resist sharing because some of our regulars are here.
Yeah, you can't help but listen to this because you hear the crinkly bag.
See, you've heard we do a second podcast called 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. So there we go. We finally have official t-shirts.
Yes.
And on the back of the t-shirt, and this is what's relevant to today's show on Life on Earth, look at that. If anybody wants to know, well, what are my numbers? How much time do I spend on values versus guarding against disvalues? There you go, 97.3. As I've said, if you're a cop, if you're in the military, if you're in politics, your number might be lower than 97. Your amount of time spent guarding against disvalues might be higher than 3%. But I can't resist sharing that 97.3.
Yes, and if you'd like to support us, you can find everything about us, actually, as a matter of fact, at robertnasir.com.
Oh yeah, if you're an identity thief, all of that personal information is there. Real names like Robert Nasir. What kind of name is that anyway? robertnasir.com. Yeah. If you're already supporting the ARC UK, if you're already supporting them,
Yeah, and
you're like, I have a little extra money.
a little
Go to
change left over.
robertnasir.com. Yeah.
Yes, and you can send us a PayPal or become a Patreon.
That's right. So yes, I need to review more of the chat there, or maybe you can see if folks had answers to any of our questions there. But yes, what recipes for good or ill have you got? And here's a big question to ask yourself. You don't have to tell us, but you could. What recipes do you find yourself returning to? Around here, we have maybe 5 things that I cook too often.
Tacos,
like,
Salisbury steak.
Yeah, we have the ground beef
Spaghetti.
items. The ground beef items are tacos, Salisbury steak, hamburgers, and spaghetti.
Hamburgers.
We have steaks, and it's usually the easy stuff. You buy the tenderloins because they're crazy tender, and you don't have to do anything special to them. And then what are our other go-to items? We return to, lettuce
Canned
salads,
green
basic
beans.
salads. I don't know why we always do the canned green. We did real green beans last night.
Because I like
See, when
canned green
Amy
beans.
cooks, we get better food.
Well, when I do.
But she rarely does.
but
But when she does, that's the thing. Amy does recipes. I talk about recipes and living a better life. Amy actually uses recipes in the kitchen.
Not only do I like recipe, I use recipes, but I use like sometimes multiple recipes, and I look through recipes and I'm like, that's the one for me, or
If-
these two I'm going to combine or whatever.
When we get
Yeah,
Great Lakes
nice.
Objectivists back on our regular monthly schedule of dinners,
Yes.
the dinners to catch are the ones where we announce in advance, oh, by the way, Amy's cooking this time,
Yeah.
because then it's going to be an Irish stew with turnips and
And cold
things that I don't even
and,
know what they are. And,
Yeah.
you know,
And homemade soda bread with Devonshire cream. And oh my gosh, I'm so hungry.
and then you find out Robert's cooking and oh, there'll probably be a pot roast or something. So there you go. But yes, what recipes do you find yourself returning to? What are you preparing a lot of? And if it's serving you, celebrate that.
Well, we do have a super chat from Sam.
Yes. So what did Sam say?
yes. Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
See, when I used to engage in a 12-step program, there were people who would say, expectations lead to disappointments, which leads to relapse.
Mm.
And what I'd want to know is, A, how's that working out for them? And B, is there something about that particular context of trying to overcome a pattern or a habit or an addiction
Right.
that makes that particular piece of wisdom work for them? Because that might be exactly what they need to think and what they need to hear in that context. But once they are, I shouldn't say over that, because a lot of the things that people go through a program for, they have to take forward that perspective that you're never really over it, which I think is a mistake. I think what you really need to tell yourself is the reasons that happened never go away. So you need to never return to the triggers that would draw you back in. But however that works for you, there may be a reason why they need to adopt that perspective. I still think we can do better than that. I still think Quentin and Linda Cordero are right when they say, not dying is not living. Or as I say, there's more to living than just not dying, or in this case, not falling back into a bad pattern. But yes, certainly if you're in a context where you always need that perspective, and oh my gosh, Bonnie asks, where can we get the t-shirt? Bonnie, now that I've seen the proof of concept,
Thank you, Bonnie.
I need to source them. Because these were expensive. These were a custom one-off. They're like $30 a piece. Now I need to find out who can make them for $5 a piece, or whatever that turns out to be.
Well, I would
but
say
thank you
if
for
you
asking.
would like to donate $100 to us, you get a shirt.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go to robertnasir.com, become a Patreon, or go to PayPal, or you can also donate to Ayn Rand Center UK, as a matter of fact, but you don't get a t-shirt.
So yes,
Oh,
Bonnie,
okay.
I will find the answer to that question. The answer right now is you'd have to order one custom for yourself.
Just see
I'll
us
make it happen.
later. See us later, Bonnie.
See us later. We'll make it happen. Yeah, I really like how that turned out.
Good. Yeah,
This is
very
nothing
nice.
fancy. It was just designed using the
Little-
stuff on their website.
Right.
Yeah, robertnasir.com at the bottom could have been a little darker. You can slightly see that it's a different color, which is what I wanted. You don't want that to stand out as much. Anyway, thanks for
Yeah.
asking, Bonnie. So yes, by all means, think about your recipes. And in a sense, we've talked about, think about your patterns, think about your habits, think about your routines, think about the script that you've written and the scripts that you run. And by thinking of them, these smaller ones that lead to particular states of minds as recipes, I find that useful. I find that compelling. I find that works for me even more than just what are my habits and routines and patterns. Because I love this idea of, if you ever want to be disappointed, here's your recipe for disappointment. Because using disappointment just makes it obvious that this does work. If I had said, well, what's your recipe for joy? That would either sound too wide, too broad, or it would sound too subjective. But once you realize, oh, these responses actually have causes, and I can enact the causes, now you've got power. Now you can start taking those steps that in your case do lead you to that feeling of joyfulness. Emotions have causes, and we can run the
Yes.
scripts that lead to those emotions. And we can put together those ingredients. And the question for you is, what are your recipes? What do you return to? Are you willing to change them up every now and then? Are you willing to try some different ingredients
Mm-hmm.
in your state of anticipation, your state of excitement, your state of pleasure, your state of ecstasy, your state of inspiration, your state of gratitude? What are your ingredients for that? That recipe perspective helps me to be more conscious of that. And it helps me to eliminate some of the recipes, some of the scripts that I'm running that are not empowering me, that are
Right.
not doing me good. Are you willing to go on running that script? Are you willing to go on cooking that recipe of anger
Right.
or resentment?
Yeah. So it's very important to introspect, and it's very important to, if you had a really bad day, ask yourself, well, did I contribute any ideas or thoughts or expectations to this day that made it even worse? And then you can say, well, this is sort of my inventory of ingredients that I used for this day that made it worse. What can I replace it with? There's one thing, going back to Sam's question about what people that say expectations lead to disappointments, which leads to relapse. I think of dieting, which I've been doing, and so
Yes.
one of the things that's helpful to me is I call it my mantra. It's not really mantra. It's just a thought that I think about a lot. And I think, whenever I want to, reach for the chocolate, reach for the cookies, usually the script that I run in my head when that happens is, I've had such a stressful day. I really need to unwind with some cookies and make myself feel better.
I deserve this.
But yeah, you could say you deserve this, but my mantra has been, Amy, let's find pleasure and enjoyment in something a little different. I can sit down and I swear to you, I can eat a radish and love it.
It's true. I've seen it.
Yeah. And I absolutely, so yeah, there are all sorts of things that I, use as alternatives to my comfort food at this point right now. So yeah, it's great. But yeah, you've got to, in terms of expectations, there's kind of you have expectations. Oftentimes the way that goes wrong is if you don't define what those expectations are before you get into the situation. If you do, well, then you have a visualization. And then you can ask yourself, is this visualization, is this, is this reality based? Is this really something that I can realistically expect? And then, ask yourself that and then go from there.
Yes.
Introspection and visualization. So great.
So I've got a couple more things to say, but real quick, going back to the super chat, Kathleen says, loving my Ayn Rand Center UK merch. One of the things I didn't mention, but if you go to aynrandcenter.co.uk, there is merchandise on the site. You can now order swag.
Mm-hmm.
You can get t-shirts, you can get carrying cases, you can get stuff with humorous graphics on them related to your favorite speakers at aynrandcenter.co.uk. Find the stuff there, and thanks for that.
Yes.
Super chat,
Thank you.
Kathleen. Mary
Thank you,
Aline
Kathy.
says, I return to the Whole Foods Deli. Can't
Yes.
go wrong there.
That's wonderful.
It's funny. We had mentioned last time that there was the big chat about veganism. Is it rational? Can it be rational? And one of the things I said about organic foods, and they had a GMO episode too. I'm pro GMO. I'm pro genetically modified organisms. But one of the nice things about organic foods is that they just tend to be better food.
Mhm.
Not because they're organic, it's just because they're more expensive and they have to be handled because they have no pesticides, they have to handle them well. And it's just, again, bring on the GMO, but yes, I do like the Whole Foods Deli, Mary Aline. And Sam again with another contribution and says,
Thank you.
some old recipes are unhealthy, but taste delicious. How do you develop a new palate? It reminds me when I had to learn to like something I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never ate raw tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter did.
Yeah.
My infant daughter, she was 2-3 years old, and she's eating a tomato with salt on it, like an apple. And when you're a parent, you try to get your children to try things by explaining to them, well, when I was your age, I didn't like that either, but now I very much enjoy whatever the thing is. And So I decided I needed to develop a taste for tomatoes, and I was able to do it. And it worked. And it took a year or two of, "Ugh, I hate tomatoes," before I finally said, "Oh, yeah, I like tomatoes." So I tried it with raw onions
I love raw onions.
and I failed. I have not been able to do it. I can eat raw onions on a Coney Island hot dog,
Yes.
and that's it. It's the only place raw onions belong for me.
So good.
And
Especially if they're purple onions.
yes.
Red onions.
And to Sam's question, I could do a whole episode on how do you develop a new palate. The first answer is you do it through repetition. You eat the tomato and you don't like it, and then you eat it again. And I think I started by cutting it, dicing it smaller, and then because part of it is just biting into it really makes that flavor happen. So use those kind of strategies. Pattern interrupts are a great way to do this. And I think, Amy, you pointed that out. When you find yourself about to fall into a pattern, have an interrupt. And I think Tony Robbins says you can develop these in advance. Decide what your pattern interrupts will be, the things that will shake you out of a pattern, a script that you're following. And I think he advocates doing, I don't remember, it's been too long since I've listened to his stuff. But one thing you can do is have a body motion that goes along with a shocking thought. So when you are trying to break a pattern of eating a particular thing, I have, if I'm having breakfast cereal every morning, what I need to do is I need a way to think of something really unappetizing when I find myself going for the breakfast cereal. And I need a physical modality to go with that. And so for me, for example, you take your finger and snap it against your leg so hard that it hurts, like snapping your fingers, and make that motion. Who cares about snapping your leg? But make that motion go along with a thought of something really unappetizing. If you know the Yes song, Owner of a Lonely Heart, there's a sequence in this film, sorry if anybody's eating dinner, but there's a sequence in this film of a man goes to wash his face, and I won't even say what happens, but it's something really unappetizing. So I link those two together. Now, if I snap my finger against my leg, I think of that scene, and now the breakfast cereal doesn't feel appetizing.
Wow.
So all I meant to say was two words: pattern interrupt. So there's a few different ways to do that, Sam. There's a couple, but we could do a whole show on how do you interrupt a pattern and develop a new palate. But it's a great question. Hopefully those two ideas are somewhat helpful there. And I thought we had another one there, but I guess that's it for the super chat, which is good because I need to wrap soon. We are going long, and I need to put a lid on this. Are you willing to go on in anger and resentment and disappointment? Are you willing, or are you willing? Am I willing? Are we all willing to go on an anger or resentment or disappointment diet?
Oh.
To take those recipes out of our recipe book, throw them off to the side. You can look them up on the internet if you need them every now and then. So you see, we return once again to this notion of you as the script writer, or in this case, you as the chef, you as the recipe book writer, and you are the script writer of your life. I've been asked, why am I polite to people who I have no particular reason to be polite to? It's a common question in philosophy. Why would you be kind to people you will never see again?
So now you're not just talking about how what your actions are specifically, just in general for yourself. You're talking about now interacting with other people.
Yes, but it is about you though. Why would you choose to be nice to, say you're on vacation, and you're on the kind of vacation where you're passing through a city you'll never visit again? Why would you be nice to the people there? Why do I make efforts to do things for people I'll never see again? Why do I tip waitstaff and other service professionals? Why give to charity? Why donate to provide aid during natural disasters? Here's one, why vote in elections? One vote will never, ever decide an election, and you know that in advance. It's a wasted trip to the polls. Even if you're advocating for a candidate and you get 1,000 people to vote for the guy you want, your vote doesn't matter. Whose world is this anyway?
Yeah, that's a good point there, Robert.
My question for you is, are you, everybody listening to this, Sam and Mary Aline and Bonnie and Marius and Scott
and Maurice
and Maurice and everybody else, are you large or small in this world?
Mm.
Are you important in this picture? Whose world is it anyway? Well, this will sound completely subjective, but I'll risk it. This is your world. This whole frickin' world is your world. This is your life.
Well, it's like saying a life is an end in itself.
A life is an end in itself.
Oh,
It's
you're
just
the
like saying
center of the
that.
world.
The reason why I am nice to people is because I'm nice to people. I want to be nice to people. I enjoy being kind. I enjoy being a gentleman.
Right.
I enjoy being polite. The reason why I vote is because I find elections interesting and exciting. I know they're going to have an impact on the world. And I like being a part of that, even if the part isn't one of, well, my vote's going to decide the election. And when I tell people, go out there and vote for Mickey Mouse, I can say that with the authority of somebody who did go out and vote for Mickey Mouse. I would vote for Mickey Mouse, even though that's an apt description for most of our politicians these days. I wish they were as virtuous as Mickey
You mean
Mouse.
two-dimensional, entirely fake?
Yes. Well put.
So
And to every other concern that I raised, why am I nice to people I'll never meet again? Because
Yeah.
I'm nice.
yeah, the way that I like to think of that is I like to stylize my world.
Yes,
How do I bring my style to this world?
that's right.
And also what you said before, how do I deserve to treat other people? How do I deserve for myself
Yes.
to treat other people?
It's not so important what they deserve as how I deserve to be, how I
Yes.
deserve to treat them.
How I deserve to stylize my life.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is larger than the whole world. Most people would say, this is larger than you, and you need to find a purpose larger than yourself. No, the whole world, well, there's something larger than that, and that's you.
Mhm.
And there it is. Yeah, I was going to qualify what I said, but Scott took care of it for me. He says, I start nice, but want to quickly discourage if they become unjust. Yes, yeah, you don't put up with stuff.
Yeah.
But the default position where you start from is not how people out there happen to be. The default position is you.
Right.
You set the standard. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a lovely show.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And again, support the Ayn Rand Center UK, aynrandcenter.co.uk. Support us. Go to robertnasir.com. Links to our past shows, links to our other show, 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, and our Patreon and PayPal as well. We've had some really generous PayPal and Patreon both.
Yes.
Folks
thank
come
you.
on board, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Makes it possible to do this even
Yes.
when the lights aren't working. Again, I have to explain, we're in a brownout condition. The whole neighborhood is running at 60 volts, which, if you know electric, means we have half the voltage we should.
Yeah.
Fortunately, most of our electronics will run on that, even though it's a little dim in here and the lighting looks terrible. So thank you for tolerating us not looking quite as professional
As
and
usual,
glamorous as we
glamorous,
usually
yes,
do.
Yes. There is one question that Bonnie has real quick.
Yes.
Was it Harry Binswanger who talked about infinite time before you're born and infinite time after you die?
Yes.
It really brought home my life is it.
That's right. People
That's
will
great.
say, well, you know, if your life is I forget what he was addressing at the time. This notion that, well, there had to be a beginning of the universe or there had to be an end. It's like, no, I don't even remember. He's made the point, we've made the point that you were born, you're going to die. All that matters is what happens in between those 2 points. Now, for your life on Earth right now and the people that you know who will outlive you, there is some reason to be concerned about what happens after you die because you love them and you don't want to be reckless or emotionally
Yeah.
flat in that regard.
Right.
But why would you care what happened 200 years ago? Why would you care what happened 1,000 years ago? I mean, other than the historical impact, why would you care what was happening 1,000,000 years ago? It's interesting. It's exciting.
Yeah.
What really matters? Everything that happened between the day I was born and the day I will assume room temperature, and I will become metaphysically challenged.
You're going to go back to the place you were in 19, whatever that was.
The year before I was
you were
born. It would be exactly like that. And Kathleen asks exactly the right question. we need to wrap this up because we're going to go to Clubhouse.
Yes.
And then we get to not only read what you have to say, we'll be able to hear what you have to say. Join us in Clubhouse. Thanks again to the Ayn Rand Center UK. Thanks again for joining us on the show. That's a wrap. See you in Clubhouse in a moment.